thank you, Kaye, for being here, for being part of this month, this celebration, and for being present tonight to be able to share a little bit about your Muskingum experience. And before we jump into the questions, I would love for you to just take a minute to give us an introduction. Tell us who you are and where you are and what you're doing.
Great. Thanks again for the invitation. It's always wonderful to have ongoing communications and engagement with Muskingum. It's been really an important part of my developmental history, and I hold the experience very near and dear to my heart still. So I'm Kaye Matthews. I am a professor and Associate Dean for Equity and Inclusion at the University of Illinois at Chicago. My academic home is in the College of Nursing, although I'm trained as a clinical psychologist. So my undergraduate degree at Muskingum was psychology. And then I left there and was trained to the degree that I was competitive enough to go straight into graduate program, and did my master's and PhD in clinical psychology at the State University of New York at Binghamton. So currently I'm a faculty and associate dean at UIC, which is out in Chicago.
Great, very good. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions that I gave you ahead of time. So we gave you an opportunity to prep some of these. So let's start with the first question. I'd love for you to share with the group tonight, what is it that you appreciated the most about being a student here at Muskingum?
Okay, so I gave that question a lot of thought, and if you'll forgive me, I had more than one favorite thing or thing that I appreciated. There were several that came to mind. For me, when I first entered Muskingum, I was from Zanesville and had been very much a student athlete all through junior high and high school, and had the ability to continue in athletics at Muskingum while a student at Muskingum. And as you know, we have a really strong reputation for student athletes. Those students who are quite talented academically as well athletically. And so I was able to enter into a community of both men and women who were interested and engaged in sports, but also were very committed to their studies. So while at Muskingum, I was able to participate in track, basketball, and cross country. And that was really a nice foundation for me to get to know a lot of students at UIC, as well as to travel around the states and be able to visit the campuses of those individuals in our conference. And I have to say, to this day, I still believe we have the most impressive campus of all our conference folks in our conference. The other thing that I really appreciated is that Muskingum has a very strong regional reputation. So the minute that you say, I'm from Muskingum, you get, oh, you're going to Muskingum. And so automatically there was this sort of a connection with what they perceive to be a really strong institution of higher education. And I felt very proud to get that, oh, you go to Muskingum. I felt very proud of that. And so it really helped me to see the reputation that Muskingum had and continues to have, and really allowed me to appreciate where I was being educated. Speaking of education, the classroom and learning environment was something that I really appreciated during my time as a student at Muskingum. There were a number of very talented instructors. Dr. Edward Barrett and Dr. Porter are two that came to mind. Their presence and the content and the ways in which they taught could wake up any half asleep freshman, right? And so what their perspectives, their experience, their teaching skills truly were gifts. And because of our small environment, we had a lot of opportunities to interact with such strong faculty. We could talk with them during class, after class time, participate in their research activities. I got an opportunity to do that with Dr. Normansell, which was really terrific. And having now been at larger institutions, I see that a lot of classes, especially the entry-level classes, are taught by other graduate school students. And while that is important for their learning trajectories, it was really, really important to me to have master educators during my time at Muskingum. What else? Of course, the Muskie High, right? There are very few steps that you can take across campus without being greeted with hi. And so that means a lot, that community of and connected, socially connected students and faculty and staff who were there. So that small campus gave us an opportunity to really get to know one another, and not just people that we happen to live in proximity to on our dorms. The campus and the classrooms were small enough that you really did get a sense of the entire campus community, which was really important as we were developed and needed exposure to different individuals, different topics. So that was great. And then finally, the location. I'm a small town person, even though I'm living in the big city now. And so to be in such a naturally beautiful environment as we're at New Concord and Muskingum, where it has just been magical. The Four Seasons there. As you know, I ran a lot of track and cross country. And so to be out on those back roads, up on those high ridges, to see the fall foliage, to, slide down the hills and during the winter time, is an urban campus just cannot hold a candle to those very special things.
So Kaye, for every prospective student who is listening to this, I think that you have just painted such a rich image of what that student experience is like. And I'm guessing that admissions is going to try to find some way to use that description over and over again. And I remember when you were on campus, was that a couple of years ago for your DSA induction, and you just sharing a really poignant memory of kind of an awakening that you had in the classroom because of that connection that you had with your faculty. So I'm so glad that that was part of your answer, because I still remember you sharing that experience. So thank you for that. And I just, the Muskie High is still something that even through our masks, because we're very vigilant and diligent about wearing our masks, even through the mask, the Muskie High still is part of campus life. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Second question, kind of on the flip side of what we just talked about, what is something that you would have changed about your Muskingum experience or about your time here?
Yeah, so I was at Muskingum from 85 to 89. And so many of your prospective students won't have even been alive at those times. And so it was a very different time in terms of the level of diversity on smaller campuses. I think that there has been a lot that has happened over these last decades that have really increased the recruitment and outreach to students from a variety of different diverse backgrounds and perspectives. But at the time that I was at Muskingum, there wasn't a single faculty of color who I interacted with on a daily basis. And so there were a couple in the basic sciences who I had some exposure to, but I think that the overall level of diversity, both in terms of the faculty, the leadership, as well as the student body, is something that I would have benefited from had there been more representation. Now, having been back to the campus in subsequent years, I know that there have been lots of outreach. And so there is Dr. Gregory, who is from an underrepresented minority background, who's now in a leadership position on campus. And there may be others that I'm not aware of. And so, the efforts that have been made over the years and the recognition of the safety that can be found in smaller campuses, I think has probably gone a long way to help sort of bring that diversity, that richness of diversity and life experiences to Muskingum that may have been a little bit lacking when I was there. Because why is that important? The ability to see oneself reflected in and positions of which one aspires to, right? College graduate, maybe a faculty position, maybe a leadership position. And so to have people, individuals in those roles who are from the backgrounds that reflect your own experiences, that gives you a sense of place, it gives you a sense of belonging, and it gives you some role models and mentors to look up to. I found very, very many mentors and role models at Muskingum during my time there. Like I said, I had wonderful coaches, I had wonderful instructors, but that was one piece that was missing for me, that diversity. The other thing that I think was missing, and I don't know that it's still the same way, is that the campus at that time was much more potentially socially conservative. And there wasn't an active engagement across the curriculum with topics of the day, right? So students are brought to campus and provided with a wonderful, rich education, a way of understanding how to think about problems, how to think about the world. And we would have benefited, I personally would have benefited from a lot more engagement and grappling with the issues of the day to help us to learn how to expand our abilities to think critically about social issues, political issues, and then really to be able to apply that sort of scientific method, if you will, to some of the issues that we were confronted with in the social world, right, in the political world. So I think that would have been something that would have been helpful. Bringing those issues to the classrooms and teaching students how to look at different perspectives, teaching students how to communicate across differences of opinions, and then helping students to formulate their own opinions that are not just based on, well, my parents thought, and so then I think, and so my children will also think, right? We're being taught to think critically. And I think social, political, other types of issues are appropriate for that. I often tell people that I learned more in my first year at Muskingum in terms of being exposed to new ideas, new information than I think I had the whole prior 12 years of my education prior to that. Art history, religious history, civ, so many things that I had just had no prior association with or no prior opportunity to learn. And I would have also appreciated to had given guidance on how to think about social issues of the time as well. That was the middle of the Reagan years, and so it was the war on drugs, and what were the implications of that? It was an increase in the wealth and income inequalities. That was the beginning of mass incarceration. It was also the beginning of what we saw, warehousing of people on scales that we had not previously seen. Those at those times were the policies were being in place that are impacting our society right now. And so to be able to grapple with those would have been really valuable in terms of my learning experience.
And did you, I want to be able to take some time with that. Did you feel there was an opportunity to have those discussions, or that those opportunities for discussions just weren't part of your experience?
It wasn't embedded into, with the exception, and maybe this is why I appreciated Dr. Barrett's and Dr. Porter's classes, with the exception of those two individuals, it wasn't as embedded in the content. So Dr. Porter talked to us about the Middle East conflict, helped us to understand what was happening with Israel and Palestine. Why? What was the history of that? How did we take that history and understand what was happening at, with those critical conflicts at that time? And it helped me to process and integrate in the news of the day in a very different historical context. So I felt I had a better understanding of what those issues were, except for beyond just the sound bites that we were hearing from the news. Well, do you know, so being able to have those types of conversations. And similarly with Dr. Barrett in the area of religious thought. So it wasn't as embedded in the curriculum beyond those couple of places I encountered it. And there weren't active events on campus that were focused around critical conversations.
Okay, so I think this last question really is a good reflection or a good segue into really from what you've just shared with us. And I think, so we have talked about, I think I said at the beginning, our theme for this month, our celebration is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. So I would love to hear how you are able to continue to promote representation and identity and diversity in your personal and your professional life.
Great. All right. As I mentioned earlier, I have my role on campus is, and in our college is as the Associate Dean for Equity and Inclusion. This is a newly developed position that was created, and we interviewed prior to the events of this past summer with the COVID pandemic and the social protests associated with police brutality. And so being in that position, I was able to be on the front lines of helping to shepherd our community stakeholders through those really difficult months and critical conversations. We held several meetings with our faculty to process and think about and understand what were the events that were taking place, how might they be impacting our students. We serve first generation students. We're a public university, the largest public university in Chicago. And so our mission is we're the people's university. And so we educate students, first generation, lower economic status, and racial and ethnic diverse students. And so to be able to take that information that was happening in the social environment and to think about how those events may be impacting our students, what type of impact what kind of environment we had created for our students that were either serving as a replication of some of the issues that they might be confronting outside of our walls, or a protective enclave, safe space where they can come and be educated and valued for all of their diversity. So we talked about that. We worked together with the students on how they were coping and what impact that these events were having on their ability to persist in their educational goals, how it was sharpening in some instances their commitment to work within communities, to work with underserved populations, given the poor access to healthcare that many of our communities encounter in Chicago and beyond Chicago and some of our rural areas of the state as well. So there was some sharpening there. And so in my role, I get an opportunity to take and look and process what's happening in other organizations across the country and show leadership into bringing some of those best practices to help our students, who are fantastic. The other is that just like I identified as a student athlete at Muskingum, I identify as a scholar activist in my professional career, right? That's a very strong identity, that the work that I do on the streets informs what I do in the lab. And the work that I do in the laboratory is in service of improving life on the street. So that's something that I hold very dear in terms of who I am and what I want my career to be, and how I want my career to be, how I want it to be remembered. As a part of that, I work very hard to work on diversifying the pipeline of future leaders in nursing education and research. And so, again, we talk with, educate students who no one else in their family has gone to college, let alone the idea that they could be a PhD or DNP level nurse educator or researcher, and then to open their eyes to those opportunities, but more important, help them to develop the exposures, the skill sets, and the opportunities and the vision for where their life could be beyond um, only working in a nursing clinical setting. Now, that is critically needed. COVID-19 has exposed really a lot of things of importance about our society. Very stark health inequalities, the under-resourced healthcare systems, the paucity and the low numbers of nurses that we have. We have a national crisis in nursing. And so I know that Muskingum now has a nursing program. That's correct, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. And so you're working to address that workforce issue there. But really thinking about how to motivate, provide skills and opportunities for the next generation to have that, to be able to diversify the nursing workforce. Because again, the COVID-19 has really illustrated for us that we have vulnerable populations based on economic status, based on racial ethnic background, based on immigration status, and exposure to systemic oppression and bias that has really placed some of our citizens at elevated risk for a severe, either being contracting or dying from this virus. So, and then finally, again, the research that I focus on, I use it to help promote public policy to help us to address some of the health inequalities that we're seeing. A lot of my work is in cancer prevention and control, and I specifically focus on smoking cessation and now working on the area of lung cancer early detection now that we have a much more sophisticated way of identifying lung tumors at an earlier stage so that we can help to reduce the very high rates of mortality from lung cancer. So those are the areas that I work. What we see, and that I work in, what we see that there are very stark disparities in not smoking rates by race, ethnicity, but the consequences, the health consequences of smoking, and differential impact of smoking on lung disease, both diagnosis and death associated with lung cancer. One of the culprits is mentholated cigarettes. And I've used a lot of my research to be able to help put forward public policy that is trying to remove mentholated cigarettes off of the market, just the same ways that we have removed other types of flavored tobaccos off of the market. And we've had some success locally here in Chicago in terms of restricting the sale of mentholated cigarettes around schools, as well as just this past year, we've had a major policy success where we have eliminated menthol flavorings from e-cigarettes. Again, trying to protect this current generation from picking up and becoming addicted, and then working on helping to do outreach to African American smokers who are much more likely to smoke a mentholated product, which is also much more addictive than regular cigarettes. So there's a lot of tobacco industry issues that are wrapped up in this, and a lot of it can be addressed through policy means. So I'll use my research to try and guide city council or state legislator on some of these decisions about tobacco control. So those are the ways that I try to address and promote diversity. Again, creating an environment in which all students can be reach their fullest potential, educating the next generation of scholars who are able to take a leadership position both in mainstream organizations, but as well as giving back and working in their own communities, and then personally bringing the heart issues that I care most about as it relates to communities, underserved communities, into the academy, and using that as motivation for the type of questions that we're asking and the types of work that we're prioritizing.
Thank you for that. I mean, again, because we have worked together and communicated over the last couple of years, I was familiar with some of what you said, but I think it's just so fascinating to think about and hear about the kind of research that you're doing and how you're being able to apply that. I also love that scholar activists. So I'm just learning some things from listening to you speak, and I do want to pause for a minute and make sure that because of course those are the questions that I told you would have to answer, but then I also told you that there may be some that you couldn't prepare for, and so I do want to pause and give an opportunity to Danielle. President Hassler has joined us, and so I want to give an opportunity there for her to pass along a greeting as well. So I'll stop talking for a minute and open it up to the rest.
So I'll jump in first of all, and this is President Sue Hassler speaking for those prospective students who are thinking about Muskingum. Delighted that you are hearing from one of our alums who is doing such amazing work. It's good to see you again, Kaye. And I was smiling. I was a bit late because I'm experiencing one of the seasons here in Ohio. And those of you who are on campus, when you walk out to your car, you'll experience it as well. There's a few inches and a bit of icy white stuff out there. So on our beautiful hills. But I have a question for you about your international work and what really drew you to work in international environments, and how has that shaped your thinking about the work you do in the U.S.?
Thank you for that. And I have to thank Muskingum College for that. When I was a junior, I did a semester abroad. I'd never been outside of Ohio, let alone outside of the country. And I took advantage of the semester abroad opportunities that the students at Muskingum have. And I went to England and studied there for a semester. During that time, I was able to travel to no fewer than 7 or 8 different countries, in addition to where I was living there for that semester in a college at University of Brunel in West London. And so having that opportunity to see the world, a part of the world, outside of rural Ohio really opened my eyes to that I want to do more of. I want to see the world. That was a place where there was really strong engagement with political issues and being engaged in that and exposed to that. And so having that experience, I've done a lot of traveling on my own, but then about 7 or 8 years ago, I had an opportunity in my current position to teach and do some invited lectures in Australia. I went to Australia at Deakin University there, which is in Melbourne, and I did several lectures for their faculty and students, and it has just taken off like a train from there. We have an Office of Global Health in our college at the university, and we do a fair number of faculty and student exchanges. So for the past 7 years, I've gone annually to Thailand, Bangkok specifically, and I've taught at Mahidol University there for 3 weeks. I usually do that early summer. And then in the fall, I go to St. Luke's International University, which is in Tokyo, Japan. And to be able to go there as a visiting scholar to be exposed to the different cultural experiences, to be able to exchange intellectual and practice ideas is very rewarding. And again, just to see beyond our little slice of the world in southeastern Ohio has just been life-changing, really. So what have I learned? Some of the issues that we take very much for granted, like high resolution imaging of lungs for early detection of lung cancer is state of the art. It's current practice in the United States, and it's in Thailand, which is a developing country. They don't have the capacity to do early detection, despite the high rates of smoking in that country. And so being able to look at the differences between the technology that's available in our healthcare systems. But in Thailand, they have a wonderful public health program that is nationally funded, and they're in communities. So students, as a part of their education, they work in senior centers, and they go to night markets and places where people are gathering, and they do public health education. That's something that is a downfall of the United States. And so it really helped me to understand and appreciate different perspectives about how to care for our citizens.
Thank you. Sounds wonderful.
Yes. And so in addition to Australia, Thailand, and Japan, I've also taught in New Zealand, and Malawi, and in Canada. So it's a wonderful and unanticipated journey in my career.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And I want to just offer my sincerest apologies. Again, I don't know if Jen shared with you, I had student organization meetings this evening, and I just had another kind of thing I need to attend to after. So my apologies. And I have a couple of questions for you, and my apologies if it's been missed on my end. But I want to ask you these questions as both an alum with some working knowledge of our campus community, and our population and demographics, but also as a fellow DEI colleague, right?
Yes.
So you mentioned diversifying the pipeline to nursing, right? And that is a focus of mine also in the day office at Muskingum. It is a work in progress, and we're having talks, but I really am after that initiative and being able to do that for our, because we have a stellar nursing program.
Yes.
And so I was just wondering, what are some best practices that you have seen, both personally, professionally, within nursing that you think may translate, or as your experience as an alum here, even though we weren't in nursing at that time, that may translate and work well for Muskingum? And then also just in general, diversifying and broadening our reach of inclusion and continuing to foster an environment of inclusive excellence. What are some best practices that you've either practiced or seen that you feel like may translate well to Muskingum University?
Mm-hmm. Because of the regional reputation and statewide reputation, and the fact that you are embedded in an area that has 4 or 5 local high schools, right? There's Cambridge, there's Zanesville, there is John Glenn High School, there's Licking-Belt, there's several that are very close proximity. One of the things that we really find is early exposure and engagement makes a big difference with first generation students. And also, so because, part of that diversity is economic diversity, right? And so to be able to reach out and to provide awareness of the discipline, the job opportunities, the very, very financial security that has in nursing, the breadth of topical or clinical areas that are possible for nursing, so work with high schools and to raise that awareness, bringing those students to campus and allowing them to sit in any of your clinical simulation laboratories that you have, some of the lectures, if there are any health fairs that are being put on by your nursing students, bringing in students to help them to participate in those activities. Many students are interested in nursing, but they're volunteering at the volunteering at the hospital is about the only thing that many students know to do to prepare themselves. But that's just, handing out magazines, and not to belittle that, but Muskingum has so much more to offer in terms of that early exposure and connecting with that nursing identity. And so that would be one of the things, is to do outreach, targeted outreach to your local high schools, doing having students go and start nursing clubs in high schools, right? So that there's that near peer mentorship and exposure, bringing students on campus for targeted experiences, including potentially summer enrichment programs. Again, those are all types of things that come back to you because it increases the likelihood that those students that you've cultivated relationships with will enroll in your fine nursing program. So that's one of the things that we've really found out, is that reaching to elementary and high schools and making that really strong linkage so that when they start to think about college, no other college makes sense to them. They know Muskingum. Faculty, I think one of the things that we have been working on is to cultivate relationships with HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. There are two that I'm aware of in Ohio, right outside of the Columbus area, that again make a lot of sense in terms of developing partnerships on specific initiatives. It's student exchanges potentially, faculty exchanges potentially, and then the recruitment of some of their students to come into your master's programs and your higher education programs. So again, we get the opportunity to diversify the student body, but as they continue on in higher education, often people stay at Muskingum or return to Muskingum. And so there's an opportunity for that to happen in the future as well. And so building those relationships with HBCUs, building relationships with local high schools, if there are any, I know that Zanesville has some Black History Month activities, and then there is the Gates. Is it the Gates? Gantz, the Gantz Foundation. There's a lot of community involvement around that. They provide a scholarship to underrepresented students. If Muskingum would donate to that and provide a separate scholarship, $500, $1,000, that would be, again, a way of reaching in and connecting with some of the diverse communities that are surrounding your location. So again, when we want people to think about Muskingum, they want to see themselves there because I got a scholarship from Muskingum. All right, I've been to Muskingum several times to observe classes, to do a clinical simulation. Muskingum students come not just as teaching student teachers, but they're coming and they're helping to offer us clubs and other activities in some of the more underserved locations. So those are some of the things that first come to mind.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
I have a question. I think that my role on these is to kind of be the voice of prospective students. And one of the questions that we get all the time is, when did you find out what you wanted to do? Like, we'll have students say, I'm interested in science, but I don't know what I want that to look like when, that comes to career-wise. So when you originally came to Muskingum, what did you think you wanted to do career-wise, and how did that change during your 4 years on campus?
Well, I was very fortunate because I took a psychology class as a junior in high school, and I'm like, this is for me. And so I followed a straight arrow from that point on. I am the outlier. Most people change their minds many, many times, and that's to be expected. Why? Because you're for the first time being exposed to the area that you think you want to study, and that has a lot of variability in that, but you're also with your other required courses being exposed to new topics. So it's a part of the natural process of getting exposed to new ideas and changing your minds based on what speaks to you, what really piques your interest, what can you see yourself doing in the future. And I always tell the students that work with me when they're choosing their dissertation or research topics, choose something that you love, because you're going to spend a lot of time doing it. And so don't do it because you read about it in a magazine or someone's uncle said it would be you could get a good job. Find the thing that you relate to, that you are excited about and you want to do for a period of time as part of your career. And be open to having your mind changed about that based on what you get exposed to while you're at Muskingum.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Kaye, I want to just really thank you for being here. I am just, I feel like I've been hanging on every word that you've said because your responses have just been so thoughtful and so thorough, and I thank you for that. And I also, I want to make sure that that I mention here, because again, we'll have prospective students watching, we'll have current students watching. I want to also just thank you for the kind of partnership that you have been building with Muskingum. Your offers and your visits to campus to work with and mentor our student groups and to be a resource. I wholeheartedly believe that kind of engagement is so important here, and it's what that intentional engagement with students and alumni is something that we're so proud of and something that makes Muskingum so special. And so I absolutely thank you for, even before tonight, for being part of that. And I just look forward to continuing conversations like this with you and for your willingness to be part of it. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Just know, ask me and I will come.
And we look forward to the day when actually having you here on campus is something that we'll be doing again. But for now, we certainly appreciate your flexibility to jump on Zoom and know that we'll be able to share this with a really wide audience. And just really thank you for being part of this tonight and being part of our month-long celebration. So thank you so very much.